Part 1, The Steel Crescent, Operation Citadel, July 1943. The Russian steppe shimmered under a pale summer sun. Waves of heat danced above endless fields of wheat, broken only by the dark shapes of tanks, silent, waiting, like predators in the tall grass. The air smelled of oil, dust, and anticipation. It was July 4, 1943. The Germans called it Unternehmen Citadel, Operation Citadel. Their goal: crush the great Kursk salient, the bulge in the Soviet lines that jutted westward like a dagger aimed at the heart of the Reich's eastern front. In a forest clearing near Belgorod, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein studied a map laid out across the hood of a Panther tank. The faint rumble of engines echoed beyond the trees, hundreds of them, forming up, ready to strike. General Hermann Hoth, commander of the 4th Panzer Army, stepped beside him. "The men are restless, Herr Feldmarschall," he said. "They've been waiting for weeks. Every delay drains them." Manstein's eyes narrowed. "We waited because the Führer insisted. The new Tigers, the Ferdinands, he believes they will win the battle for us." Hoth hesitated. "And you?" "I believe in steel," Manstein replied. "But the Russians believe in endurance. We shall see which faith is stronger." On the opposite side of the salient, deep beneath a camouflage net of branches and straw, Soviet engineers sweated over coils of wire and buried mines. A young lieutenant of the Red Army's 13th Army, Sergei Antonov, wiped the grime from his forehead and looked up at the sky. "Comrade Captain, how many mines have we laid now?" "Over 500,000, came the reply. Antonov gave a short whistle. 500,000? That's enough to stop God himself." The captain smiled grimly. "Let's hope it stops Guderian." Nearby, trenches wound through the earth like veins, layer upon layer of defenses stretching for miles. Anti-tank ditches, gun pits, artillery hidden in barns and forests. The Soviets knew the attack was coming. The entire steppe was a trap. That night, under a waning moon, the German camp hummed with nervous energy. Crews checked their tanks, Tigers, Panthers, Panzer IVs, their armor gleaming under thin moonlight. Mechanics murmured prayers as they tightened bolts and loaded ammunition. Inside a tent, Major Karl Meinhardt, a Tiger commander, sat with his crew, passing around a cigarette. "Tomorrow," said the gunner, exhaling a thin stream of smoke, "we crush the Russians and go home." Meinhardt shook his head. "No one goes home until the Führer says so." He looked toward the east, where flashes of lightning danced on the horizon. "They're waiting for us. I can feel it." At the Soviet forward command post near Panayrai, General Konstantin Rokossovsky leaned over a field map as reports arrived from scouts and partisans. "The Germans are massing near Orel and Belgorod," an aide said. "Armor divisions, many of them new." Rokossovsky nodded, expression calm. "Good. Let them come. The deeper they push, the harder they will fall." Another officer hesitated. "Comrade General, will we counterattack immediately?" Rokossovsky's eyes glinted. "No. We will let them break their teeth first." He looked around at his weary staff. "Remember this, they are fighting for conquest. We are fighting for our homes." Just before dawn, the German lines came alive, engines roared to life, hundreds of them. The sound rolled across the plain like thunder. Tank tracks churned the soil, men clambered into turrets, adjusting goggles, hearts pounding. In the distance, Soviet artillery batteries stirred, thousands of guns, their barrels glinting in the rising sun. And then, as the first light broke the horizon, the Red Army struck first. A storm of fire erupted, artillery shells screamed overhead, bursting among the German assembly areas. The earth shook. Tanks exploded before they could even move. Meinhardt's Tiger rocked violently as dirt and shrapnel rained down. "Skies. They're hitting us before we even started," shouted the driver. "Forward." Meinhardt roared. "Get us out of this kill zone." Columns of smoke rose across the steppe. Horses bolted, trucks burned, men shouted and scattered. When the barrage finally lifted, the horizon flickered with muzzle flashes, Soviet guns still spitting flame. But the German line, battered yet unbroken, began to move. Panzer Marsch. Thousands of tanks rolled forward, engines screaming, their steel bellies grinding over the scorched earth. Above them, Stukas dived, sirens wailing. The Battle of Kursk, the largest clash of armor in human history, had begun. Part 2, The Fields of Fire, July 5, 1943. The sun rose blood-red over the Kursk salient. Dust hung thick in the air, mixed with smoke from burning vehicles and the acrid tang of cordite. The steppe, once golden with wheat, was now a nightmare of churned soil, twisted metal, and death. The clash begins in the southern sector, near Prokhorovka. General Paul Hauser watched his panzer divisions advance. Panthers, Tigers, and Panzer IVs rolled forward in perfect alignment, their turrets glinting in the harsh sunlight. Infantry and mechanized units followed closely behind, filling the gaps between armored steel. Steady now, Hauser muttered to his chief of staff. Do not let the Russians see us falter. Every second counts. Suddenly, a report arrived from reconnaissance. Sir, enemy armored units spotted ahead. They are in defensive positions, camouflaged, prepared. Hauser's jaw tightened. Then we crush them. Full speed. They will not hold. On the Soviet side, Marshal Georgy Zhukov walked along the front line, his eyes scanning the horizon. Trenches bristled with anti-tank guns. Artillery emplacements were camouflaged with hay and mud. Mines crisscrossed every approach. Comrade Lieutenant, Zhukov said to an aide, the Germans believe in their steel. Let us prove the strength of our courage. The lieutenant nodded, handing him reports of incoming panzer formations. Thousands of tanks, sir. They will strike hard and fast. Zhukov's expression was calm, almost cold. Then we shall strike harder. Prokhorovka, the tank maelstrom. By mid-morning, the southern edge of the salient exploded into chaos. Over 800 tanks from both sides collided across fields churned into mud. Tigers thundered, Panthers spun, T-34s charged with reckless courage. The earth shook with every impact. In a Tiger, Major Karl Meinhardt shouted above the din, engage. Hit them before they hit us. Shells screamed past, some striking friend and foe alike. Infantry ducked into foxholes as tanks rolled over every obstacle. Artillery pounded relentlessly, and smoke filled the horizon. Private Sergei Ivanov, aboard a T-34, gritted his teeth. Comrade Sergeant, how do we survive this? The sergeant fired a coaxial machine gun, answering with bullets instead of words. The tank shuddered under impact. Ivanov leaned over, watching a German Tiger explode in a ball of fire. We survive, he whispered, or we die trying. By late afternoon, the clash reached a fever pitch. Tigers spearheaded assaults, T-34s countered with daring flanking maneuvers. Both sides suffered catastrophic losses. The fields were strewn with burning armor, shattered limbs, and the stench of oil and blood. Voices in the inferno. Amid the chaos, soldiers whispered to keep themselves human. A German corporal muttered to his crew, if we take Kursk today, the Reich will be safe for years. An artillery spotter shouted to his lieutenant, we are bleeding men faster than we can count. Stop counting, aim, fire, repeat. On the Soviet side, Sergeant Nikolai Petrov crouched behind a wrecked tank, calling coordinates into his radio, fire at that ridge. Concentrate. Do not let them advance. Explosions rocked the ground so violently that the horizon shimmered. Men and machines were swallowed in plumes of smoke, fire, and dirt. It was the largest tank engagement in history, a testament to human endurance, courage, and folly. The German advance stalls. By evening, the German advance had slowed. Mines had destroyed dozens of tanks. Anti-tank fire from hidden bunkers cut swaths through advancing infantry. Smoke and haze obscured commanders' vision, and communication lines were shredded. Hauser spoke to his officers, they are stronger than we expected. Hold the line, adjust the plan. We cannot falter here. Across the fields, Zhukov smiled grimly as he observed the German armor bogged down. They bite the soil like dogs, he muttered. Let them taste the iron of Kursk. By nightfall, both sides were exhausted. Fires burned across the steppe. Survivors huddled in the mud, tending the wounded, and listening to the distant rumble of tanks still fighting. The cost was staggering, hundreds of tanks destroyed, thousands of men dead or wounded, but the battle was far from over. The next day, the Germans would attempt another assault, while the Soviets prepared a massive counterattack that would shape the fate of the Eastern Front. Part 3, The Counterstroke, July 12, 1943. The Kursk salient, once the scene of relentless German assault, had become a crucible of destruction. Smoke hung over the steppe, mingling with dust, the acrid smell of burning tanks and scorched earth. The Germans had failed to achieve a breakthrough, their momentum stalled by Soviet defenses, mines, and unyielding T-34s. The Soviet Strike Marshal Georgy Zhukov stood atop a small rise, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Far across the fields, he could see the battered remnants of the German armored divisions. "They have overextended themselves," he said quietly to General Rokossovsky beside him. "Now we strike. Hard. Fast. Relentless." Soviet artillery batteries roared to life along the entire front. Thousands of guns unleashed a deafening symphony of destruction. Every hill, ridge, and hidden trench erupted with fire. Mines laid meticulously days before claimed dozens of tanks before they even moved. Lieutenant Sergei Antonov, crouched in a ditch with his men, grinned despite the tension. "Comrades, today we send them back to where they came from. Every inch is ours." The soldiers cheered quietly, aware that the real danger had only begun. The German struggle in a command bunker near Prokhorovka. General Paul Hauser pounded the map with his fist. Reports streamed in: lost tanks, destroyed supply lines, encircled infantry. The initial optimism of Citadel was fading fast. "They counterattacked too soon, too strong." Hauser shouted. His aide hesitated. "Sir, reinforcements are on the way." "Not enough. Not nearly enough. The T-34s are everywhere. Every valley, every rise, like ghosts." In the mud and smoke outside, German tank crews fought desperately. Major Karl Meinhardt clambered into his Tiger, surveying the carnage. "Sergeant, we hold this ridge at all costs." "Major, there's no ridge left. Every inch is fire and steel." "Then we fight in the mud. In the blood. Wherever the Russians leave us standing." The Battle of Prokhorovka July 12 would be remembered as the largest tank battle in history. Over 1,200 tanks collided across a churned and mud-soaked plain. Tigers, Panthers, and Panzer IVs engaged T-34s in chaotic clashes. Smoke from burning vehicles created a surreal haze, and the roar of engines and artillery turned the steppe into a deafening furnace. Private Nikolai Petrov rode atop his T-34, peering through the mud-caked periscope. "Comrade Sergeant, the Tigers are everywhere. Aim for their sides. Keep moving. Fire." Meanwhile, German tanks became increasingly vulnerable. Confined by the terrain and obstructed by the Soviet defenses, they struggled to bring their superior firepower to bear. Many were immobilized, destroyed by artillery, or abandoned by crews. Even the Luftwaffe could not dominate the skies. Soviet fighters and anti-aircraft batteries harassed German aircraft, limiting reconnaissance and support. Human courage amid carnage. Amid the chaos, individual acts of bravery stood out. Sergeant Ivanov climbed out of his tank, waving a flag to signal another crew. "Comrade, retreat through this line." Bullets whipped past him, but he did not flinch. Across the field, Meinhardt's Tiger was hit and began to burn. He ordered his crew out, shielding them from the flames. "Move. Move. Live to fight another day." Civilians watched from the fringes of villages, their homes damaged, livestock killed. Many had fled, but a few remained, praying for the storm to pass. The tide turns. By July 13, the German advance had effectively ended. Their offensive exhausted, supply lines stretched thin, and losses catastrophic. Meanwhile, Soviet counteroffensives, Operation Kutuzov in the north and Operation Polkovodets-Rumiantsev in the south, struck the overstretched German flanks, forcing them to retreat. Marshal Zhukov walked among his officers, calm and resolute. "They came for Kursk believing in the strength of their armor. But we hold the heart of Russia, and they will bleed for every inch." Across the plains, the Soviets had seized the initiative. The Red Army would begin a series of offensives that would push the Germans steadily westward, eventually reclaiming lost territory and turning the tide of the war on the Eastern Front. The aftermath of the Batlethy steppe was littered with wreckage. Tanks burned in the fields, artillery lay shattered, and thousands of soldiers, both German and Soviet, lay dead or wounded. Major Meinhardt, sitting among his surviving crew, stared at the horizon. "We were supposed to win here, supposed to break them." A corporal muttered beside him, "We fought well, sir. But some battles are too big, even for steel." For the Soviets, the victory at Kursk was immense, a psychological and strategic turning point. But the cost was enormous. Every village, every farm, every patch of land was soaked with blood and bravery. The battle had lasted over 2 weeks, but the legend of Kursk, the courage, the desperation, and the steel, would endure forever. Part 4, The Scorched Steppe. By late July 1943, the smoke over the Kursk salient began to thin, revealing a landscape carved by fire, steel, and blood. The fields, once golden with wheat, were now churned into mud, dotted with burning wrecks of tanks and artillery. The stench of scorched metal and death hung heavy in the air. The German retreat field Marshal Erich von Manstein walked along the battered lines of the 4th Panzer Army. The initial optimism of Operation Citadel had evaporated under the relentless Soviet counterattacks. Supply lines were stretched impossibly thin, ammunition, fuel, and food were scarce. The Russians, they fought like lions, Hauser muttered beside him. Even when cornered, they refused to yield. Manstein nodded, voice low but firm. And we underestimated them. Our strike was bold, but it met a wall of iron and courage we could not break. The German units, shattered and exhausted, began a cautious withdrawal. Tanks that could still move rumbled westward through the battered countryside, their crews silent, heads down, grief and fatigue written on every face. Major Karl Meinhardt climbed into his remaining Tiger, surveying the ruined steppe. "We leave Kursk," he said to his crew. "Not because we are defeated by men, but by the steppe itself, and by the spirit of Russia." Soviet consolidation across the front. Marshal Zhukov and General Rokossovsky oversaw the reorganization of Red Army units. Trenches were repaired, artillery replenished, and wounded soldiers tended to. Though the victory was decisive, the cost was staggering: tens of thousands dead, countless more wounded, and a landscape utterly devastated. Lieutenant Sergei Antonov, now mud-caked and weary, helped a comrade into a makeshift dressing station. "We held them," he said quietly. "Yes," his friend replied, "I scanning the horizon." But at what cost? The soldiers had endured the mightiest German offensive ever mounted, only to see their home soil tested and burned. Yet the morale of the Red Army soared. Kursk had proven that the Wehrmacht was not invincible, and the tide of war on the Eastern Front was turning irrevocably. Stories of courage amid the destruction, acts of heroism and humanity persisted. A Soviet artillery crew, cut off behind enemy lines, held their position for days, repelling every German assault before retreating under cover of darkness. German tank commanders, like Meinhardt, protected their crews even when their vehicles were destroyed, ensuring the survival of men over. Machines, civilians, trapped in the villages between the battle lines, helped tend the wounded and smuggle food to soldiers, sharing in the risks of combat. The steppe had become a theater of extremes, valor and horror intertwined. The strategic aftermath. Operation Citadel had failed to achieve its goals. The Germans had lost initiative on the Eastern Front, and the Red Army began a series of counteroffensives that would carry them westward toward Germany. Kursk marked a turning point. The Wehrmacht would never again mount a strategic offensive of similar magnitude in the East. Manstein later wrote in his memoirs, "We entered the salient with hope and pride, but left humbled." The Battle of Kursk was not a failure of courage, but of calculation and circumstance. Zhukov, reflecting on the victory, noted, "The Red Army endured the hammering of their steel, and when the time came, struck back with the strength of our homeland." Kursk was our moment, the proof that we could prevail against the mightiest of our enemies. The human cost: over 200,000 men were killed or wounded, over 6,000 tanks and self-propelled guns were destroyed or disabled. The steppe was a graveyard, littered with remnants of what had once been the pride of two great armies. Yet in the ruins, life slowly returned. Villagers rebuilt homes, soldiers repaired equipment, and the Red Army prepared for its relentless advance toward victory. The courage, sacrifice, and endurance displayed during Operation Citadel would echo through history, a testament to the human spirit under fire. The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, had ended. The Reich had lost its last chance to regain the initiative in the east, and the Red Army would march steadily westward, unstoppable and resolute. Steel had clashed on the steppe, men had endured the inferno, and history had been irrevocably altered.